go get them again.
Welcome back to the Robezoid channel. I'm your host Mark and welcome to Sampling Samples Saturday. This is your subscriber's choice. This is the one that won. It is from the house of Guerlain and part of the Patchouli Ardent collection. This one called Patchouli Ardent. Absolutely love this line as it's completely opposite of what Guerlain is kind of known for. It's much different than their other higher echelon line, which is L'Art La Matière, which is sweeter vanilla based fragrances for the most part. This one right here really surprised me as a sample. It's not your typical patchouli, release. Don't expect that dank green hippie like patchouli that you would come to expect. Actually, Guerlain has a really good patchouli from L'Instant de Guerlain series, but it's not something that you're accustomed to. However, keep it tuned in because there is some good moving parts in this release. If you own some from this Patchouli Ardent collection, this might be a redundant release. I can see that. But let's go under the hood, let's take a look at some stats, and then let's sniff it out and talk about it. So the release date was back in 2020, so it has a few years behind it. Nose Terry Wasser, the in-house perfumier. Big notes to me: cedar, rose, leather. As you can see, patchouli isn't the big note in here. It could be, if we extended this instead of 3 notes, maybe 4 or 5 notes, it could be in there, but it's not. So you are getting different ideas. Personally, for me, this is more rose based than anything, but let's get into it. I got a healthy decant of it. I am wearing it as my scent of the day today for its last wearing, but I am going to basically drain my little decant here. There is fumes left. And of course, as usual, we launch and we lost the cap. It didn't break. So the initial hit is, okay, where's the patchouli? It goes totally left field here up top, and it opens with a fig note. Yeah, the fig note actually is going to stick around almost down to the early dry down. And you can sense little bits and pieces here coming in and out of the scent. It's not a major factor once the darkness comes in. However, it has a piece in this, and honestly a unique piece. It really kind of makes this thing a little different. This fig is not coconutty, it's not watery, it's more green and fruity than anything. Now the fig itself doesn't stick around as being the lone note to your nose as the scent immediately starts darkening. It's very much, honestly, if you sprayed this and waited a minute, you might have missed the fig. Heavy pink pepper comes into play, heavy rose. Those two are almost attached to the hip. Pink pepper and rose share similarities in scent profiles. If you ever do a Google search or you ever obviously smelt some of these items, you are going to see that they have some similarities to them. I do get sweetness right away, and that could be from a jammy rose to the pink pepper. Either way, you are going to get some sort of red fruity aspect in this release, especially up top early on. You are going to smell that. So once the pink pepper and the rose introduces itself, you get some sweetness, but you start sensing some of the much darker notes at this point as the scent gets some mild dustiness. It really almost made me think of a, westernized oud here at some point. It kind of felt that way at some point, some dustiness and some woody aspects, which is cedar, but it's not, your high-end oud or anything like that, but it just reminded me of that, and it goes Middle Eastern right away almost. So there's some earthy qualities in here, mildly, again, patchouli based, yes. There's some smoke in here, so you are going to get some smoky aspects here, perhaps from an incense note, and heavy woods. You are definitely getting some cedar. The woods are cedar, and once the cedar introduces itself, you get a little bit of a black pepper. Cedar can do this at times, but it's also in the note breakdown. You are going to get a little bit of that piquant from the black pepper. This is where the scent brings you to the Middle Eastern touch that these Patchouli Ardent do bring you, and they bring it to the table. And honestly, this is where the scent can go familiar to some that have you know, a couple of the brand like myself. I mean, it really brought me to that imagery. It was like, oh, this kind of smells a little bit, you pulled from here, you pulled from there. So the uniqueness of this fragrance, especially if it's not your first one smelling of this particular line from Guerlain, will feel familiar. It really will. There's a little touch of funk in this fragrance that some people may miss, and you may not. I didn't miss. I really liked it. It's cumin-like spice. I mean, really keep that in mind. So if you are testing this one, keep that in mind because it's not in the note breakdown. So it's kind of like a, so there is a little bit of that. It goes in and out of this opening and throws itself until the mid, and then you lose it in the dry down. So it's not a major factor, but it's one of those that I always look at certain things that certain noses don't like. You know, things like powderiness. I like to mention that in fragrance reviews. You know, a funkiness, of course, cumin-like. If that's brought to the table and it's not in the note breakdown, users may blind buy this, not thinking, you know, this is a patchouli based fragrance, and then they get this funk and they're like, no, that's not for me. So there's a slight animalic thinking at this point as leather also introduces itself. The smoke helps this leathery idea as well. So it doesn't go suede-like on my skin. It does go a little denser, a little deeper as a leather note. In this opening, it's quite clear the rose is the central theme. And honestly, I would say that this is a rose dominant scent to my nose. The rose is quite beautiful, showing some green facets, some wet dewy rose qualities, some waxy qualities at the same time, and of course some jammy pieces here and there while having smoke, woods, earth, fig, spices surrounding this whole idea. So very complex build by Wasser. But again, the build itself, the building blocks, the way it was, and I'm not saying it's badly done, no it's not. However, it's redundancy is kind of there a little bit with this line, especially when you're kind of expecting something patchouli-esque and it's more rosy than anything. Rose has been used quite a bit in this line too. So at this point in the journey, going into the mid, the scent never really made me think of earthy, dank patchouli at all. It was a surprise as I was expecting a true blue patchouli based, no pun intended, the blue color of the fragrance bottle, but yeah, I was kind of expecting something with heavy patchouli, and really I'm not getting that. So towards the back end of this release, the idea starts getting a little more earthy, more woody in the back end. I sensed several times a vegetal aspect as well, which is nice to see, you know, that 3D complexity in a scent like this. The leather has a larger role in this back end, and the cedar too. And there's a musky aspect to continuing to have that dusty effect as well. As for the patchouli, it's an airy type, and this would be the furthest fragrance I'd recommend for a patchouli scent for somebody. I would actually recommend L'Instant de Guerlain Extreme from the same line, which would be a much closer idea of what patchouli kind of smells like. This ending shows a slightly mentholated green glow here, giving, you know, the woods and the earthy aspect, almost kind of making me picture of the roots of a tree being exposed from the ground and a little bit of dirtiness from the earth. And that's where I'm going. I'm actually surprised too on how far the fig stayed in this fragrance. It was definitely in the background of this scent for the most part, but giving it some much needed brightness, but it eventually did die a slow death in the dry down of this release. But it was nice to see it, because something like that, first of all, it was a shock to the system when I got that right away. Not only that, but it stayed around with a lot of these darker notes. Overall, Patchouli Ardent does not evoke a true blue patchouli note. It's more about woods, rose, to me, with a leather note. The blending is on point by Wasser, so you got to give them props for that, as I felt it had several ideas that moved around. The Middle Eastern idea or imagery of this line is still, you know, good here. It's still there. However, the one thing I would mention is, again, if you own a few of these Middle Eastern Guerlains, that you may just be like, this one is not different enough to warrant a purchase of a full bottle, maybe a decant, maybe just a sample and you end it there. That's where I feel like this one kind of doesn't have its own real idea here. Now let's get into seasons, day-night versatility, and performance. Seasons, a dark scent like this, it does have some uplifting notes at some points, but really a fall-winter fragrance. Early spring, I see the rose actually blossoming a lot more on your skin, maybe the fig showing itself a little more in the warmth, but that's where I would kind of cut it off here, early spring. Depending on your climate, you can maybe pull it off also summer nights. Day or night, I feel like it's more of a nighttime scent. It has that darkness to it. That would appeal to somebody. You can, of course, wear it during the day casually, things like that for your own good. Sure, why not? Versatility, below average. Again, there's some things that kind of stop it from being an average versatility to above average. Obviously, this whole Middle Eastern theme of rose and dark notes kind of brings down the versatility of a fragrance like this. You know, you're not going to wear it in the high heat. Maybe you do, but for me, it has some. Even the cumin kind of like spice here in the opening kind of stops me from you know, bringing the versatility up on the score on this one. Performance, the performance on it was pretty good. Nothing crazy here. Longevity was 6 to 9 hours, which is pretty good. You know, something like this, I like these kind of fragrances to be above 10 hours, but 6 to 9 on any given wear. And again, take my my thoughts with a grain of salt. It was just a small little decant. Projection, average. It starts off like a bomb, almost like once that fig is gone and then everything else comes into play. You know, the fig comes into play, you're like, oh, okay. And then all this darkness comes in and this thing kind of bellows out. First hour, boom. And then it just kind of gradually starts falling as far as projection goes. So I felt like it was only average projection. Not beast mode, not high projection, just average. So my final thoughts on this one was good and some bad. Here my final thoughts are, this reminds me, actually, you know what? It reminds me of Jean-Claude Elena's work with a spicy rose. There's a lot of Elena-esque things, and you can refer to Déclaration as one of Elena's work that he did a spicy rose. Yeah, it has a large portion of it has a little bit of Elena in it. It's less clean than what Elena would do, dustier, much more Middle Eastern, we'll say. But it's almost like Elena was in here doing his little thing and then Wasser did a whole bunch of other stuff around it. Like that's how I feel. I swear Guerlain took the stickers from the names of these fragrances too at the same time, because the sticker on this is not a patchouli fragrance. The names of these fragrances, I feel like they move them around and you may get sticker shock on some of these. So you better be careful with this line because the stickers sometimes don't reflect what you get inside the bottle. So this one is that prime example. It says Patchouli Ardent. Their patchouli is a portion of this release, but is definitely not the central theme of this release, at least in my opinion. Now, disregarding the sticker shock, because if I'm just grading it on this is not a patchouli, you know, as far as patchouli scent goes, it's probably a 3 out of 10, 2 out of 10. It doesn't really show somebody that wants to smell a patchouli. Now, take that away and kind of go, okay, from the Guerlain line, you know, there's Absolument Rien, and the complexity of this fragrance and how the notes are put together and how I really actually enjoyed this scent, how the fig was kind of different. It was definitely a shock, but a kind of a good shock, but at the same time kind of like, where's the patchouli? Like, fig, did I get this to the wrong decant? So that is something that is interesting, and the fig staying around, that is interesting. Cumin was a shock. I'm like, where's this spice coming from? Heavy rose, was not expecting that, even though I knew there was rose in there. There's a slightly dustiness that I was, again, a lot of things that were really surprising. So overall, I enjoyed my testing with this fragrance. At the end of the day, that's where I'm happy. I'm happy with the complexity. I actually want more of this fragrance after this testing. Again, that's telltale sign of sampling samples. When the sample is done and you're still kind of craving the scent a bit and kind of wanting it in your collection, that's a telltale sign that it's probably bottle worthy to me. It's definitely not the best of this line, but it's a very solid release. that's basically where I'm at. So if I had to give it a score out of 10, and I always do this for sampling samples because this may be the last time you see this on my channel, I'm gonna give it a fairly high score. I was kind of going 8 or 9. I'm gonna go 9 with this one, 9 out of 10. Now it's not definitely not a huge stunner, but at the same time, it has a lot of things that, again, just shooting this video right now and looking at my notes and going, wow, you know, the fig, the cumin, the smoky aspect, the dustiness in this fragrance, the complexity, the blend. There's a lot of positives here. And of course, there's some negatives here. Of course, I own several from this actual lineup from Guerlain. So it reminded me a little bit of that. Good thing, it reminded me of Jean-Claude Ellena, which is always a good thing. If you remind me of one of the best, if not the best perfumier of all time, you're doing something right. Price tag wise, these aren't that bad. It's not, you know, $300-400. They're, you know, they're actually almost around what designer fragrances are being. Like when people are spending $200 on a Sauvage Elixir, and this thing is right beside it at the same price. It's not in the same shop, but you start thinking. So 9 out of 10 from me. Now that you heard my take, I'd love to see yours in the comments below. Have you smelt this fragrance? And I just recently saw, and I haven't done any real research, but I saw that some of these Patchouli Ardent are getting new bottles, like the Aqua Allegorias. Now, I don't know if there's reformulation. I don't know if they're getting rid of this line, but I saw it somewhere. I might be, you know, dreaming this up, but I'm pretty sure I saw this bottle with the, it had like the gold, like bee look on it. The Aqua Allegorias kind of look to it. So I have to get back on that. So as always, a great import fragrance will make a lasting impression. Choose your patchouli based fragrance wisely. Thanks for watching, YouTube. Have a good one.